Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ruck Up Buttercup. We are back with another wonderful guest. Today we have Kelly Caggiano-Hollyfield it goes together, right? The whole
Yeah.
name, right? And she is actually an officer in the Space Force.
Yep.
And she wrote a really, really nice book that is called My Mommy's in the Military. So it kind of gives a different perspective. We have seen a lot of books come and go of our daddies being in the military, but this is a fun book for the families that have a bit of a different dynamic. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and like your experience within the military?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been in for about 13 years now. I started my military career in the Air Force doing space operations, and then the Space Force stood up in 2019, and my career field moved to the Space Force. And so I followed my career field and over to the Space Force I went within those first couple of years. I've had an opportunity to be stationed all over the US. I started in Florida, California, Colorado, Virginia currently, and heading back to Colorado this summer, doing all different types of space operations jobs. Most recently, I've been doing a lot of staff work out at the Pentagon. Everyone does their staff tour at some point, but I've really enjoyed my experience so far and looking forward to the next step, getting back to the squadron and back to more of the actual hands-on operations type work.
Yeah, Ashley and I were talking about that before we got on. We were kind of wondering how that transition from Air Force to Space Force happens because I know that they're kind of intertwined with one another, anyways, because they are. We're kind of comparing it, I guess, to the Marines and the Navy, where they're like
Yeah.
similar but not the exact same branch, but they kind of intertwine. So was that like a really odd transition to go from being like established in one and then having to like kind of start over in another?
It wasn't that difficult at first because when I first transitioned, almost all of us came from the Air Force, and so it was very much still Air Force culture at the beginning. So pretty easy for me as an Air Force officer to move to the Space Force. As we've grown and expanded, we've brought other people in from the other services as well, and so our culture is ever evolving and changing right now. And so now we're starting to see more of a melding of it's actually more kind of joint like in the Space Force because we have so many different service members. And of course, we now have people coming into the Space Force who've never been in any other branch. So all they know is the Space Force, which is an interesting perspective as well. But a pretty easy transition for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What do you find that the like cultural difference is like inside of the Space Force? Like, how does it compare to the other branches that you've seen?
I would say we still definitely line up most with the Air Force in terms of the culture, just because the vast majority of us do still have that Air Force heritage. It is very different though, because unlike the other services, we don't really deploy downrange very often. We do have some squadrons that absolutely deploy downrange. That is definitely in our wheelhouse, but most of our personnel are deployed in place operating from an operations floor somewhere. And so actually a good comparison is kind of like an RPA pilot, right? They're operating from Creech or somewhere in CONUS and but their mission's happening around the world. And it's kind of a similar concept for us as well. So in that sense, we don't have the months long separation from our families normally, which is nice. But then it's also difficult to explain to my son why mommy's at work at 1 o'clock in the morning and or why daddy's at work at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and why we don't get to have weekends together. And so it's a little more of that uh, disruption to daily life at random intervals sometimes than you would see out of like a traditional type of deploying career field.
Yeah, we've talked about that on the show before because my husband used to work for JSOC. So JSOC is also kind of very like it's almost like you're deployed from your house, like from where you're at. So they worked really, really weird schedules. And Ashley and I've talked about in the past that almost it was easier when he would go on actual deployments because at least our
Yeah.
life at home was just solid versus when he was at home, but like kind of getting those weird
Yeah.
duty hours because it's really hard to transition, especially if it's not on a regular basis because 1 week he'd be there, one he wouldn't, and we wouldn't know really ahead of time. And it'd be one
Mhm.
of those things where like, how do we even schedule a trip home? How do we schedule medical visits, like things that I can't go to with the kids, my visits. And so I agree that it's really kind of either way. Like it sucks to have a deployment where you are overseas and where you're having to be completely separated for long times, but it is also really difficult to do it at home.
Yeah. No,
I think
I
it's
definitely get that.
incredible.
I did a traditional deployment to Afghanistan and I was gone for about 5 months. It was pre having my son, but I had my stepdaughter. And so, I missed out on all of her visits with my husband while I was deployed. But then, when I'm home or, my husband, we're both kind of juggling shift schedules, and that also causes different types of disruptions. So you just adapt and go with it, and we're making it work.
Yeah, I say it kind of compares to like working out of the home versus working in the home. Like it's still
Mhm.
a job if you work in home, but
Yeah.
it's more difficult because you do have the interruptions of everyday life, things that are continuing to go on. But then it's also hard to work out of the home because you're missing out on those everyday things that are happening in your home. So it's kind of the same comparison, I guess, of being deployed or versus being an in state deployment kind of situation. But another great topic though that kind of goes into that is your husband's also active duty. So you're kind
Yeah.
of living not only being the active duty person, but also being a military spouse. So that perspective is definitely something that I know me and Ashley don't really have that perspective of what it's like to do both sides.
It's definitely got its benefits, both of us being active duty, both in the same career field, both in the Space Force. And it's really great when I can kind of come home, and we don't work in the same office. We're actually at two different bases right now, close but separate bases, and so we can come home and we can kind of just offload, and it's really easy to talk because he understands everything I'm saying, and vice versa. But then at the same time, it's also kind of a disadvantage because we know too much about each other's jobs. So largely though, it's been great being able to talk to my husband about work easily, and same for him. It's just really nice to be able to share that with my partner. So
Yeah, I think that the perspective that from when we have talked to other females who have been part of the military was kind of the like, you aren't as bitter. Like I do feel like as a military spouse, when things happen, I get a little bit more like bitter about the situation because
I'm very bitter right now with my husband. And it's not his fault, but I'm bitter because he gets to go to Europe for a year and I do not. So I, yeah, and it plays like I do think that plays a huge role, and I do think like having those like options of having that easy talk, because like sometimes I'm just like, hey, how's your day? And it's just
yeah.
like a big old shrug, and I'm like, can I get a little more than a shrug? Like, who wasn't behaving today? Who was your star like soldier? Like something. So that would be really nice to kind of have that like to be like, oh yeah, you did that. This is what I'm working on. You should try to implement this. Is it ever come like a competition between the two of you though? Like since you guys are in the same career field?
I don't think so. My husband's a few years ahead of me in time and service, so we've not really had a lot of opportunity where we're going up for the same things at the same time, which does help with that. I've got some other friends who are dual military as well, and they're in the same time frame, and so I definitely see the interspouse rivalry sometimes. But we've had a nice separation. And because of that split in where we are in our careers, it makes it easier for us to stay assigned together. And so the Air Force and then the Space Force have done a phenomenal job managing joint spouse assignments for us. And I know that's not the same across all the departments, but the Department of the Air Force as a whole really prioritizes keeping military couples together, because if you can't keep us together, odds are someone's getting out, and then you've just lost all of that talent you've invested in. So,
Yeah.
so far, knock on wood, we've not been separated yet, and we're moving on the next assignment together this summer. And then my husband's likely retiring out of this next assignment, so then he could follow me around for a little while.
There you go. That'd be nice. Yeah, that is really nice that they have that program into place. And I've known a few dual military families who have been really lucky and have been able to stay together. And even if it's just like a few months, that like a month or two apart, like they've been able to go to the same location, and that's always really nice. I do think that's a good program they have in place, and hopefully, I don't think we've had anyone talk. I don't think I've met anyone who's not been able to move on for the reasons of the military. They like maybe the family chose to stay.
I think that when we were talking to Dogs on Deployment, that's how she kind of started that program was because they were both at different duty stations.
Oh yeah, that was right. She did say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does happen where that, and it's really frustrating, especially if you have a family. Like being the active duty, you can speak on this, I'm sure, a lot more than I ever could, Kelly. Is that in like parenting as a mom and a wife, I know that a lot of my life is parenting and not so much his. Like his life is much more career focused than what I'm able to do with what I want to do, I guess, if that makes sense. Obviously you are a major, you've done amazing things in your career as well, but you kind of just kind of stepped into the mom field in the last couple of years. How has that like affected your relationship and kind of like your career?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting shift. I know I was not made to be a stay-at-home mom. I applaud those who are, but that is just not me. I like my career. I like going to my job every day. I love my son, but I like dropping off at daycare in the morning and then coming back in the afternoon. He's had his fun day. I've had my good day. And but I will say, before I had my son, we'd get the PCS timeline, every 3-ish years, and I'd get that notification of assignment, and I'd be like, all right, great, I'm ready to move to the next place. I've got the itch, I'm ready to go. And this move is going to be the hardest, because I came to this assignment when I was about 8.5 months pregnant at the height of COVID. Really interesting time to PCS. And we've been here for 5 years, which is a very long time for us to be in one place. And when I tell you we have moved into this house, we have moved into this house. And so the PCS in a few weeks is going to be painful. It's the first time where it's very bittersweet for me, where I'm not 100% ready to go emotionally. This is where I brought my son home from the hospital. And so this one's going to be tough, but it's just a balancing act for me. I used to do more TDYs, TADs before I had my son, and I was happy to go on those travels to weird places and for extended periods. And after I've had my son, I find myself not volunteering as often for those TDYs unless they're really mission essential. So definitely a shift. Fortunately for me, I'm kind of getting to the point in my career where I'm not the technical SME on things anymore. They don't want to send the major. They still want to send the lieutenant and the captain who are the technical experts. And so I get the benefit of my rank working in my favor, where I'm back doing the paperwork and the admin. So I don't have to go on those trips as often, which is nice. So far,
Well,
we'll see.
you said your husband's getting close to retiring, so I'm sure he's also kind of on that like downhill. Like if something medical comes up with your son, that he would have the chance a lot easier to get out of the office too, which is probably nice to kind of like have that advantage of like he's kind of on the out, you're still kind of in the middle of it, and that gives him more of the responsibility in the parenting side, I
Yeah.
guess.
We've been able to balance it pretty fairly. If my son's homesick for a week of time, we try to alternate every other day who stays home. The government laptops have made it easier for us, to try to, if I have to stay home because it's just my turn and he's got something critical at the office, I can still keep up on my emails from home while my son is napping, whatever it is. But we've done a pretty good job of being able to balance it. But as he kind of looks to the retirement, it'll probably shift to him a little bit more. So we'll see how that goes in the next couple of years.
I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I wonder if it's just easier to divvy up those like responsibilities, because you guys are both dual military, and it's like, well, we both answer to the military, so like it's just the luck of the draw for that day, where I feel like when it comes to just like a service member and their spouse, like for me, I'm just like I was always the one that was just like, didn't matter if I was going to like get reprimanded at my job, because it was the army that was a little bit more important. So for anyone who's listening, it is doable, y'all. You can totally do it and balance that life out. And I think that's just what's really important, having communication, balancing that life with your partner can make it really work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what has worked in my favor too is I've been fortunate to have some phenomenal leadership for most of my career. And especially since I had my son, I probably over communicate with them when it comes to my family needs, and they've all been so receptive and helpful. And actually, I mentioned, PCS here when I was 8.5 months pregnant, height of COVID. Daycare wasn't really an option because most daycares were closed or severely limited. And we were both working in the Pentagon at the time. And when my maternity leave ended and his paternity leave ended, it was back when it was still 3 weeks for men. It wasn't the new regulations yet.
Yeah.
I had talked to my boss ahead of time. I was like, hey, when my leave is up and his leave is up, the Pentagon was not at full occupancy. Most of us were still telework. And we said, hey, do you mind if we rotate every other day who comes into the office so we can keep my son home longer? And they said, absolutely, not a problem. And we got to keep him home until he was almost 9 months old, which was a huge relief. And Matthew sat on plenty of phone calls with me with the generals, and they were very gracious when Matthew would interrupt the meetings. And they were phenomenal. I couldn't have asked for better leadership at such a unprecedented time for all of us.
Yeah. And I feel like in most leadership are parents. I mean, most of them are at that point where they have kids, whether they're young kids or already grown up kids. So I think like, that's important. Just like, if you have a situation, just talk, bring it to someone's attention, say, hey, like, this is happening, my wife is working, or I need to be home at this time of the day. As long as you communicate, usually most of the time they're going to let you do it.
Yeah.
So that's it. So Air Force, mommy. So he's 3 years old.
He's
now?
actually almost 5.
My
He'll be
goodness.
5 in June. I can't believe it.
Like you said, like right at COVID time, so 5. It's so crazy, like realizing like how fast mine will be 7 at the end of the month, and I'm just like, I cannot believe she's almost 7 and my other one is almost 11. So
yeah,
it's crazy how fast time goes.
It really is. My stepdaughter is starting high school in the fall. I mean, it's just, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I met her when she was just before she turned 3 years old, and I can't believe here we are talking about freshman year of high school for her, and we're starting to talk about colleges, and I nearly like died when we started talking about colleges already. So it's amazing how fast time is flying.
I love it. I love it and I hate it at the same time. It's one of those things where it's like I want them to grow and be their own little people, but at the same time I'm like, can we just
slow down a little, just slow down
just a little bit. So you have your upcoming PCS, and I know that's super scary. Like we're all like, anyone who's listening to this season, we know that me and Sabrina could potentially, well, I know I'm PCSing, but Sabrina may be moving at some point again this year. So what made you decide to write your book?
Yeah, so it started on my train rides into the Pentagon. I had been struggling to find a children's book that I could read to my son. We read to him every night before bedtime since he was a newborn. And I was struggling to find a book about women in the military. Plenty of dad in the military books out there. Fantastic, great books to read. Great for my husband. And we can explain what daddy does and start to explain from a young age, why sometimes he's on a shift on a weekend, or, if he's gone for an extended period. But the couple of books I found out there for women in the military, it was very much geared towards I'm a pilot or I'm a soldier. And it was very much the main career fields that you would think of. Nothing that explained space and what that meant and how, what mommy did. And so it was difficult to find. And for that matter, there were no books that explained what space was for daddies in the military either. But I just couldn't find, of the 2 books that I found out there, I couldn't find one I liked that explained mommy in the military in a way that I appreciated. So I was riding the train into the Pentagon one morning, and I have my nice long Northern Virginia commute in, and I started thinking, well, I've got some ideas on how I could write a story for my son. And it really just started as kind of a little pet side project on my commute in. And I had a little notebook and I'd write my ideas down. And as I got further into it, I thought, man, I could potentially really do something with this and actually write a book and publish something. So I started crowdsourcing requests from other women in the military on what jobs they wanted to see represented, the non-standard jobs. And so there's large online forum on Facebook of women officers in the Air Force. And then there's a couple of dual military forums and whatnot. So I sent a note out on all of those and I said, hey, other than pilot, soldier, infantry, other than the main jobs everybody knows, what would you want to see in a book? And so I got some ideas, started doing some research, and kind of came up with a handful of career fields that I felt were underrepresented. And I kind of took it from there. So I started researching what those career fields were called in different services, because everybody calls it something a little bit different. And you're right, every career, every service is just a little bit different. It's the same thing, but we call it different things. We like to keep it easy. But I started looking at uniforms, and I wanted to have officer and enlisted. So it was a book that was that could speak to a large audience of women, not just a couple of niche, because that was my complaint, was I can't find a book that speaks to me. So if I'm going to do this, I want it to be a book to speak to many different women in many different career fields in all of the services. So wrote that down. Took me, I don't know, maybe a month, maybe a year or so to be happy with my draft. And then I started looking for publishers, and that was a very long journey as well. I think that was another year and a half effort trying to find a publisher. And once I found my publisher, he was really great. A collaboration helped me find a great illustrator, because I am not an artist. Stick figures are where I'm at. So we definitely needed to find a great illustrator. She was great to work with, a lot of collaboration. She was very receptive to my anal attentive attention to details of uniforms. that always bothers me too when uniforms aren't right. So we spent a lot of time getting the research right and getting the uniforms and the equipment right. And it was just, I think from start to end, it was almost a 3-year process before I finally had a final book ready to go to print. And it's been out for a little over a year now. So it's been quite a journey getting to here.
One that's just like a great journey to like share, because like, most of the time when we've talked to different authors, they've all kind of expressed the same thing. Like, I couldn't find this in the market for whatever reason. And we've had a few different children books authors and things like that on. What I really, really liked about yours is the attention to detail, the attention to those pictures and the illustrations, but as well as having those different jobs. Because one, when we think of the military in general, we do think about just a pilot, a infantry soldier, a boatman, or whatever you want to call it in the Navy. Like, you just think of those simple things. And every job you can imagine is in the military somewhere. And I think that's really important, not only to show like our kids, but like this would be a great book to say, like, to just for anyone to read, so that way, like, well, I want to be a soldier. Well, what kind of soldier do you want to be when you grow up? Do you want to be in the Space Force, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, whatever, Coast Guard, whatever branch you want to be in? Because there's so many different jobs. And I really do like how that is portrayed in your story, because this is, I think, the first one I've seen that has every branch done in a way that it's not just the same job in every branch, if that makes sense. So like the other books we've seen, like, it's kind of the same job portrayed, just in a different branch. So it's just like a foot soldier or whatever. I love this. And I love how, like, there's a picture of, like, when my mom deploys, and there's a picture of like mom on the computer and the little girl on the tablet. Like, it's so sweet and it's so genuine and it's so like true to military life. And I think it's so cute. Like,
yeah. I think it's great that also that you talk about being in the daycare setting, because I think that it shows that women can put their career first, right? Like, we love our babies, but it is important also as a woman to be able to have the job that you want, especially when it comes to military. You've committed a huge chunk of your life already to your career. And just because you have a baby, you shouldn't have to be like, okay, well, I'm going to step out. You can finish your career and retire. I'll take care of the baby. That's not how it has to go. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that it's really cool that you represented that all of these moms are still doing really cool things, and they can still have kids, and their kids can learn alongside them, and they can still be the same like family dynamics, and it's okay. Like, it really just gives that permission to a lot of military, because I've had a lot of friends who were active duty. When I got married really young, so most of his friends became my friends. So when we were young, a lot of my friends were active duty, and a lot of them did give up their entire career when they had a child. Like, it just was how it was. And hopefully that's changing in the career field, that where like people are saying it's okay to stay in and like let your kids have a life in a different way than what is the like picture perfect American family, kind of situation. And that's super cool, because why not? Like, why put our efforts into careers and learn and have all this experience and then just be like, that's okay, I'll just be a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, no, I've had several friends who they had children and they decided, you know what, I do want to get out and this is what I want to do. And I applaud them for being able to do what they want to do and being in a position that lets them do that. And but then on the flip side, I've got plenty of other women, men and women, friends in the military who have stayed in after having children. And it's so much easier today, I think, than even a decade ago to make that decision to be able to stay in. There are better resources in place. Parental leave is longer, and so it lets me get plenty of baby time, before I go back to the office. The daycare facilities on base are getting better. In some cases, they're the cheapest option in the area, like Northern Virginia. I didn't know childcare cost so much before I moved here, but we've got my son at the CDC at Quantico, and it really has made it so much easier for us to both maintain our careers, not one of us have to make the decision to sacrifice because we didn't have the support mechanisms in place. So plus we've had the added benefit of being close to all the grandparents right now. So the grandparents, really nice. We're taking advantage of it while we can. So they've been great too.
Definitely do that. And, even like if you're listening and you've made that decision to stay home, like, we talk about this all the time on the podcast. Like, you have to do what's best for your family. So if if it is both of you working for your mental, I mean, I get it. Like, I've been a stay at home mom in quotations because I work from home, but I'm viewed as stay at home mom. Like, I have to remind people all the time, like, well, I still work full time. I'm just working from home and having to, juggle all of the kid things around that. Like, there's still that option. And that was a great option for me because, like, if you've been to listen for the podcast over the last 5 seasons, like, I actually ended up losing a job. I got fired from a job because of my husband's career and being that primary parent and things like that, because that was just what happened. And I know that's happened to other people and things like that, but it came down the lines of like, it's fine. Like, I'm okay. Like, I was like okay with not doing what I wanted to do because my goals changed in life. But I was like, I still want to work and things like that. But Sabrina knows, like, I'm getting antsy being at home all the time, so like I like have to get out and find things. But I think it's different too. My kids are getting older. They're more independent. They're more willing. They can do things on their own. And so finding what's best for your family, having that communication with your partner is so important. And don't let anyone make you feel bad about what choice you make, because I feel like there's so many people who are like, I'm judged for, going to work every single day. Who cares? Who cares what other people think? As long as your partner, yourself, your child is happy, healthy, and thriving, that is all that matters.
Absolutely. And, there definitely mom guilt is real. And there are some days where the mom guilt hits me hard. I know you both know how that goes. And if there's my husband and I make it a point to try to make it to all of the parent involvement events at the CDC when we can, but it's difficult because he's at Quantico and we work further north from Quantico. So it's not a small task to get back. And we've missed 2 total since he's been in daycare. And let me tell you, my son does not let us forget that we missed those 2. A year ago, we missed spaghetti lunch, and I still hear about spaghetti lunch being missed.
Yeah. And it's sad because some of our, I mean, my kids know 9 out of 10 times my husband's not making a school event, not because he doesn't want to. It's just his job. My husband's an infantry guy. They are constantly gone. They are constantly in the field. They are working late hours. He's not always able to just leave and come. And we typically don't live near installations either. We usually live within 25, 30 minutes. So we usually live a little further away. And so we make that choice as a family, but that also means that he can't just step out quickly and then go right back to work. So, but yeah, they do, like, I wish daddy could come. Like, they make that. And I'm sure dads have guilt too. It's probably a little bit different from the moms because we feel like we have to do all the things. Like, that's just the mommy nature. But yeah, he'll probably be, 10 years on. My spaghetti lunch. It won't go away. My 11-year-old does it, or my almost 11-year-old does it. Hey, mom, you remember that one time? I'm like,
I know, and it's so terrible. Like, we already have enough mom guilt as it is, and then they like always push it back on you, and you're like, okay, could you just stop? I know, I feel bad.
Yeah, like, that spaghetti lunch has become a core memory for him. So he's 4 years old, and he's going to take that one to college. It's okay.
Parent guilt, I guess you could just call it, is so hard. And I mean, just seeing the representation between the 3 of us, we all have very, very different lives. And like, because I homeschool, I'm home all the time, but I also work from home, but I'm here. My kids are with me all the time, and I still get mom guilt. Like, it doesn't really matter what you do. There's always going to be something where you're like, oh, I should be doing something better. I should be doing something more. And just, you have to just let it go. Like,
you do.
Yeah, I've been reading Mel Robbins' Let Them book. And so she actually, more of what that book's about, if you haven't read it, is more actually about let me. Instead of let them, you focus more on like, what can I do to make things better? Versus like, yeah, you can feel guilt. You can feel like everybody's shame on you for these things. And it's like, yeah, or I can just be happy in what I'm doing. And like, I chose where I am in my life because this is what I want. I know that we want to homeschool. That's what we want to do with our kids. I don't know if I feel like I really want to do that every day. Like, there's days where I'm like, I would rather just go back to work. You guys can go to school and I want to have my own life. But then it's like, I look at their, they did testing a couple weeks ago and they did so well. Like, they're way above their peers. And I'm like, no, this is working. Like, this is why we did what we did.
It's the small validations that make like all of that mom guilt kind of just go out the window. Like, oh, I am doing something.
Nice, yeah.
Absolutely.
And like, we were saying, like, no matter what you choose to do, as long as it's right for your family union, that's all that matters. And that's what's really great about the military, like, community in general is we all come from all these different backgrounds. So we're not going to be the same. We're not going to have the same ideas of how our kids should learn or anything. Like everything should be, or how we are handling different things. So just taking that time, and again, just making your family unit is all collectively on the same page is all that you can do to get through everyday life. So
Yeah, make the choices that are right for you, because people are going to dislike your choices either way. Like, it just doesn't really matter.
live your best life. That's all you have to say. So I love how your book just talks about all these different women and is representing different women, because there is such, I mean, there's a lot of women in the military. It might not be as much as all of the daddies and all that kind of stuff in the military, but like that sounded so dirty. Sorry. So there's a lot of women in the military, and it's really great to have that representation, because there's so many little girls out there who are seeing that they can do whatever they want to do when they get bigger, and seeing representation in a book of a soldier that's a vet, in uniform, all these different jobs. I think it's so great. Like, not even just for military kids, but just for kids in general, like who have an interest in the military. I think it's such a great book, Kelly. Like, I
Thank
think
you.
that having that, and then I lived up, like, and it was so diverse too throughout the book. So like, that was another thing, like, not only with, the jobs, but everything
And
in
see
it was
themselves
very
in it. Like,
inclusive.
everybody
Yeah.
has an opportunity to see themselves in your
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
And that was very important to me. That was such a huge piece of the back and forth of my fantastic illustrator, was just making sure that this could be the book that answered or that helped other women tell their story and not have to write their own book to do it. So I wanted to have that solution available, that answer available for anybody else who is struggling to find their own story in a book to explain to their children what they do. And so that was my motivation. That took it from just a pet project, and maybe I'll pay someone to illustrate it for me just to read it to my son, to taking it to an actual publisher and putting it available for others to purchase. And the goal was never for me to turn a profit. I have a job. This was just a side hobby, but it has been just so great to see the responses from the women and men that have purchased the book and read it to their children. And one of my coworkers, actually, he was in the Army for a few years in intelligence, I think, and got out, and now he's a government civilian, and his wife is not former military, but he bought the book and he read it to his daughter because he wanted his daughter to be able to see what she
That's
could do.
exactly. Like, I think
Yeah.
there's so many there, like, not only like is it a great book for, any woman who is in the military who has kids who wants a book to represent them, but this is like such a good book to showcase, like, like my daughter's like, I want to be in the military. And she's the girliest of all girls. Like, she is princess, sparkles, pink, everything frilly. And it's so funny because, like, you would think of my 11-year-old, who's my son, he would be the one, he's like, nah, I'm good, I want to be a YouTuber. And my daughter's like, no, I want to go kick ass like my dad. And I think it's so funny, but like, being able to show her, like, hey, look at this. Like, it's really funny because I'm gonna go put it on my big Kindle for her later. She hasn't gotten to read the book yet. I'm gonna go put on the big Kindle so she can read it tonight. And she's gonna be so excited because she's like, because like in her dad and my husband's field, there's not a lot of women. Like, it's very less likely that there's going to be a woman in the infantry, in the Army, as there are men. So she's always used to seeing men in uniform. She's known a few women, so like, she's like, oh, there's women. Like, I remember one day we were on base and she saw one of my friends that was in uniform, and she's like, wait, girls can be in the military too? And I'm like, yeah, girl, like, you can do whatever you want to do, like, just, and she's like, but do I have to do the things that daddy do? Because I do not want to jump out of an airplane. And I'm like, you don't have to. You can be a singer in the military if you really wanted to. She's like, that's
Yeah.
what I would have been. I was like, well, you actually have to sing, honey. So I was like, you can do whatever you want to do. And I think this is a great book to have for any military family, to have it in the repertoire. Because I mean, there's so many great out there, but it is a different aspect. It's not like my daddy's deployed. Like, this one just shows like,
Just
this is my
everyday
mom.
life.
I'm really proud of like the job she's doing, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's nice for girls to see that women can join the military. I think even now, how long it's been since women were part of the military, since the Vietnam era, and now you can still do it. Like, you can do any job, and your kid could be really into one thing, and the military is going to cover college. They're going to cover, like, there's so many benefits, the health insurance, the housing, like, there are so many benefits to it that more people should be suggesting that their kids go move to the military route.
Because I grew up military, and I grew up military and going like, I just don't want to be part of the military. as an adult, I kick myself in the butt all the time saying, like, I wish I had done at least the 3 or 4 years just to say, like, I did it. I continued the family line of being in the military because my family and my husband's family come from really long lines of military. But at the same time, I wouldn't be still paying on college loans, y'all, at almost 40 years old.
Yeah.
So, like, I really wish that, like, I think, like, when I was finishing college, like, high school, like, it was still kind of, like, taboo for girls to be, like, in the military type of thing. And again, I grew up military and I was just like, I didn't even want to marry into the military, y'all. I wanted nothing to do with the military after growing up military. Not that I had a bad experience. I had a good experience, but during high school, I moved a lot. Not to like, I wasn't like, it wasn't a typical military lifestyle. We moved quite a bit. So I was just done with it. And of course, I met my husband my senior year in high school. And then that was 20 years ago. So, like, obviously things didn't work out the way I thought they were going to work out, which is great because now we have this great life. We love the military community. I don't know why I ever thought I was going to get away from it.
It's so funny because I feel like once your family anywhere in the line is part of the military, you are. Like my dad and my grandparents or both my grandfathers were both in the military, but I didn't grow up around it. My dad got out before we were even like in existence. But then somehow it ended up being I married military. My brother joined the military, so now we're all right back into that same circle. And it's funny because it just like is so ingrained in some families, like where it just
it really is. I mean, our families are. I mean, literally, we can trace ourselves all the way back to every single war we've had someone in, like, for humankind. Like, we can trace it back on either side. So, like, we have long. I mean, my dad, my grandfather, great grandfather, all down the line. So it's really nice to have that represent. As a military kid, like, I would have loved this book. As a little girl, I would have loved to have this book. Just to say, oh yeah, like, because I knew there were females. Like, my friends' parents were like, moms were in the military. I had, all these different jobs, but it's like I really love that all the different job aspect to it. Like, I think that is really key too, because there's not a lot that showcase that. Yeah. And I'm always, oh, do I have to jump out of airplanes? I'm like, there's so many jobs in the military, y'all. And I wish and me growing up in the military, I was kind of oblivious to that because I knew infantry, ranger, special forces. Like, that's the world I grew up in. So I grew up in sweaty, stinky boys in the field jumping out of airplanes, shooting guns. That's what I grew up on. And I was like, I have no desire to be a part of that. Little did I know that, I could have gone and done my dream job in the military. I could have done any other sorts of jobs that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an epidemiologist for anyone that's listening. So I wanted to be, like, involved in, like, how the spread of pandemics and diseases and stuff happen. And I knew that wasn't going to be a career I could have necessarily being a military wife, because I would need to live near a place that had a job like that. And most military installations are smaller bases. So, but yeah, like, there's so many jobs, and I love that that's represented.
And if you had told me when I was an ROTC cadet in college that I'd be one day operating satellites, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. My undergraduate degrees are in environmental policy and journalism, and here I am flying satellites. So I separated, and I actually came into the Air Force under a different career field. It didn't work out for me. They reclassed me into space. And it really clicked for me. Something I would have never had picked for myself. I always had just an interest in space because my mother raised me on, she had, the amateur telescope in the backyard and raised me on all the space things. And so I've always enjoyed space as a hobby, but never ever thought career field for myself. And so Air Force helped pay for my undergraduate degree, and they said, cool, that's nice. We're going to teach you space things instead. And I said, okay, sounds good. You paid for part of college, so I can't really complain. And then that, led to me staying in past my initial 4-year commitment. And then I used tuition assistance to help pay for my first master's degree. And then I said, I'm done with voluntary education because working on a master's part-time was painful. I actually finished it while I was in Afghanistan. So it was a 4-year journey that finished at the end of my deployment, which was nice. But when I came back, I said, if you want me to have more schooling, you're going to pay for it. And the Air Force said, joke's on you. That's exactly what you're going to do. So they sent me to Johns Hopkins for a year, and I got another master's degree. And so I've been so fortunate with my career fields, and it was nothing that I was ever exposed to as a child. I had family members in the military, uncles, cousins. My father was National Guard, but he got out before I was born. So I didn't really have that military life as a child either. And when I went into college and I told my parents I'm going to do this thing called ROTC, I think my mother almost had a heart attack. My dad was like, "You're crazy. You can't do that." And then he accidentally called the Army guy and he offered me a full ride to school. And I said, "I'm not going to the Army, Dad." He's like, "That's a good life choice." Yeah,
Yeah.
my Marine Corps uncle assured my mother the Air Force was the right choice for me, and really just calmed that down a little bit. But it has been such an opportunity, and I wanted to help share that with, explaining that to children as well. So I'll
I
get,
mean, the
stopped if I'm
potential
at
is
the grocery store in town and I'm still in uniform. I'll get stopped by kids, they'll ask me questions about. First, the big fascination is, "Oh my goodness, the Space Force is a real thing." And I'm like, "Yeah, let me tell you about the Space Force." And when they get past that, then, they're the little girls, sometimes it's just so cool to see them come up and ask questions and kind of see that light bulb moment of, "Oh man, like if that's something I want to do, I can go in the military."
I really think, especially because like STEM is such a big thing right now in schools, that like the potential for girls in the future of joining the Space Force and being able to like live out their science like dream jobs, because I mean that's what's really great about joining any service branch, is the potential of having those jobs that may not have been feasible because you can't afford to go to the schools or anything like that. And so I think that's a great way. And I mean, not that there's not a lot of deployments right now. There are deployments and there are things happening, but it's not like when we joined school,
Yeah.
when my husband joined the military, we were in the height of
Mhm.
Iraq and Afghanistan. And so there, and that was literally the conversation, because I had voiced like, I'm thinking about it. My dad was just like, absolutely not. You're not allowed to join the military. And because he was afraid that like I would deploy. He had been deployed for the last, on and off, for year on, year
Mhm.
off, 12 months for the last decade. And he's like, and that's still not going. He's like, "You're not doing that." And so that was one of mine, like, "Okay, fine, Dad, I won't do it. I'll go to regular school, blah, blah, blah." But again, like as an adult, I wish I had done a little bit of time in service, just so that, because I feel like the experience you get in the service is just very different that you can get in an everyday like job. Like there's just things that you can learn and take away from having an experience in service in 3 years, like 3-4 years, like that's all
Mhm.
all it is. So, and if you go longer, you go longer, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah. It's definitely provided me with opportunities that I would have never had in any other career if I hadn't gone in the military. And, I see some of my friends from high school still living at home, and, they're doing well, doing fine. But the things they've been exposed to are so much more contained to my, that small bubble that I've just had such an opportunity. One of my best experiences in my career has been my deployment. And, I know my mother probably gained 55,000 new gray hairs while I was in Afghanistan. And my dad probably lost a few more hairs while I was in Afghanistan. But I deployed to support JSOC, and it's not the guy going outside the wire. If I was that person, something's gone horribly wrong. That's not what they brought me there to do. I was there to help plan space effects and space support. But I just learned so much from the people I had the opportunity to work with there. And if I hadn't had that deployment, I still had a very fulfilling career, but that deployment alone opened my eyes to so many new things in the world. So
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. And if it's something anyone's even remotely interested, I would say it's worth exploring the opportunity to come in to any of the branches.
There's so many
Yeah.
benefits. Like you get, like we
And
talked
there's
about,
so
the
many
housing,
branches.
medical, but
Yeah.
then there's also just the experiences like you're talking about. I mean,
The
I also
community.
came from a tiny town, and the people that I went to high school with have no experiences in comparison to what we've done. We've lived all over the world, literally, and like we get to meet these different people and these different cultures, and we get to just learn so many really, really cool things. Like that's also why I love the podcast. Like everything behind the scenes of the podcast is a headache to me most days, but the fact that I get to like meet amazing people like you and like just get to another experience and hearing a different story and a different perspective of life is what makes the military part of my life my favorite part of being part of alive. Like just getting to know the beautiful people that this community
Yeah,
holds.
absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm looking forward to the day when I'm done and I'm done moving and I can settle down and right. I mean, I'm sure we're all looking forward to that at some point in the future, but I will definitely be sad whenever I decide to hang up the boots and stop moving. And I'm definitely getting very jealous of my husband now that he has a definite light at the end of the tunnel and his retirement is much more imminent than mine. I'm definitely very jealous of that. So we'll see how much longer I last after he retires. But it's
Yeah, and it doesn't go away. Just so you know, like my husband got out. He did like what your friend just said that they did. They joined, and he's back civilian side. But it doesn't go away. The veteran community is actually huge. No matter where I've been, the VFW, there's always going to be free resources. There's going to be people coming out, and it stays. It just transitions a little. I mean, right now, at least where we live, it's very heavy old veterans. So like we don't really participate in a lot of the veteran stuff here, just because it's like they're a solid 30, 40 years older than us. The majority of them, but it does exist, especially like where you're at in Virginia. I'd imagine that a ton of the veteran community there is a lot younger. Yeah. It's a lot more in the 40s, 50s, which is where you are when you retire. Yeah. So you just kind of transition into this other side, but it's still really cool. Like that's something that not everybody's going to have the option to have, is this community that just like transitions no matter where their life goes. It's always, you can find it.
Part of it. I mean, and I feel like some people think like once they're out, but like once you're part of the military community, you're a part of the military community, whether it's been a year out, 10, 30, I mean, there's still those connections and they still hold strong. I mean, we've talked about this, like I've been all over the world, like Sabrina, and we've literally been in like a small random town in Europe, and all of a sudden we see people that we've known through our military journey. We're just like, what are you doing here? And they're like, well, what are you doing here? And we're like, it's just, the world seems so vast and big, but it really is just, I mean, the community itself is so strong and big that there's always going to be there, and there's always going to be someone to support if you ask for the help. So I mean, I feel like that's what's really amazing about the military.
Absolutely. And I mentioned it before, the Facebook forums with we've got the women's officer forum and the dual military forums, and women who've never met each other, different services, literally the other side of the world, the things I've seen people do for total strangers that we've had no other connection to other than we're both in the military. I mean, I've seen people coordinate a dog sitter for their house in like Kentucky for, while they're in Germany. I mean, just the things that we were able to do as a military community, it's just phenomenal. And you guys are both right. I mean, even when I do get out one day and I have to transition back into civilian life and start talking like a normal person again, I don't think it is either, but
ever gonna go. Like, I feel like no matter, I mean, I'm in Virginia as well, but I'm on the western side of Virginia at Virginia Tech right now. And like, I'll say something, and thank goodness, like the few people I've made connections with, like they, two of them were prior service. So two of them were in National Guard. So like they understand the lingo. So like, well, like finally, like I'm like, everyone's asking us like, what's happening with your PCS? And I'm like explaining it. And like, they're the only two that are like, that's stupid. Like they're all up on my, like they're like, we're with you, and everyone's like, oh, well, that's great for Jeremy that he gets to go to Poland. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I will be happy for him at some point, but I'm gonna live in my like bitterness of I have to go to North Carolina and he gets to go to Europe. Okay, leave me be. No, I think it's so great, and like we say this all the time too. Like, don't let a bad experience in your military journey, where you're active duty or a spouse, because there are people out there who will bend over backwards and help you figure out whatever it is that you need assistance with. Like, if it's finding someone, that's what this network. It's a network. We all have connections all around the world. Like if you look at your group of people, your acquaintances and things like that, we know somewhere, anywhere, and somehow or another somebody will be able to get you the answer that you need. And it's just, that's what I love about the military. I genuinely love that there is that network that's already built in. Like, it's not even something you have to really work at. Like, it's already there. You just have to plug in.
It's great.
And go.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. I know that we are going to be sharing the heck out of your book, and hopefully it finds the moms that need it, the people who need that representation for their kids. We hope that it will get out to the right people. And I know that you have a busy schedule, so we're really glad that you took an hour out of your busy day to join us on this show and tell us a little bit about your life and everything that you've done.
Thank you both so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the last hour chatting with you both and helping me spread the word about my book and my story. And I just hope more families see themselves in the story and can share it with their children. So I really appreciate it. And this has been fantastic with both of you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Everybody who's listening, her information will be in the show notes. So of course you can reach out to her on her website or look for the book as available on Barnes & Noble. We've seen it on Amazon. It's anywhere that you want to look for it. So We hope that you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Like we like to say, Ruck Up Buttercup.
Bye, everybody.